It's always cool going back in time and looking at albums that have defined a decade. And back in the 2010 decade, a heavy year in hip hop was 2011 because it started off on a strong note in 2010. And then we ended up getting so many different types of albums in 2011 that, not only aged well, but kind of carried the genre for the decade to come. So today, guys, we're going to be ranking classic albums that came out 10 years ago. So that is 2011 or 2021. And it's crazy to think that these albums are already 10 years old. I can't wait to look back on these and say, hey, fuck, what do we have 20 years down the line in 2031? But guys, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe because we are doing content on the daily here and we always appreciate your help. And for the subscribers that fuck with us and love our videos, smash that like button because we're always putting in effort, guys.
Yeah, and thank you guys to the Patreon members who have actually voted for this episode. So the options for this week were new rap albums dropping before summer 2021 ends, which got 3 votes. Then we had ranking classic albums that turned 10 years old this year, which got 15 votes. And then we had what's next for Logic's career, which got 2 votes. So it was a clear winner. And if you guys want to have your say in future episode topics, go to the link in the description and look at our Patreon plans. And you guys can actually, have a say in our content, which is always fun to do. And for this list, we were actually talking about 8 albums. And it's not to say that we view them all as classics, and we'll get into each one and which ones we actually do view as classics. But these are, let's say, the most popular albums and the albums that there's a general consensus around that there is a classic certification for them, let's say.
Yeah, and they all these albums have sort of a cult following to them, so fan bases adore these, and it's kind of cool because a lot of these rappers that are going to be mentioned on this list started off with these projects and kind of made their career. So, Lou, I think it's only fitting that we start off this list with Rolling Papers by Wiz Khalifa, and this might come as a surprise to a lot of you guys, but me and Lou are big fans of this project, and I think it's because of how iconic this project was at the time. Frat rap was at the top of its game. It's has more of a pop rap aesthetic because the content matter isn't too deep, very light listen, but all the production's crazy, and it was sort of like this huge wave of stoner rap that was coming out in the 2010 decade, especially in 2011. So talk to me about Rolling Papers and take me maybe to the first time that you've been introduced to this album.
Yeah, so to start off, I don't think this is a classic album. I think it's a pretty okay or solid album. Not really, one of the best of the year, to be honest. But we just included it because Wiz Khalifa's fan base adored this project. And I mean, it kind of started that legendary Rolling Paper series for Wiz. And, he was coming off of, Kush and OJ, which was probably, it probably is his best body of work to this date.
That's facts.
And to me, honestly, Wiz Khalifa was never really an album artist, but I just love the vibe of his music. I've always have. And with Rolling Papers, I mean, you got bangers like Black and Yellow, you got On My Level, you got No Sleep, and it's that very, frat rap, kind of music that you listen to in high school. And what I appreciated was Wiz Khalifa's delivery, to be honest, just because it's very dazed, it's kind of nauseating, and it kind of puts you in that headspace of a stoner, and it kind of feels like, he was just, rolling and smoking throughout the making of this album. And it is a fun listen. Like I said, to me, it's not a classic, it's not a fantastic project because, I mean, overall, the subject matter stays kind of stagnant. He's kind of talking, about popping bottles of champagne or smoking or hanging out with girls. But I do like his taste in gin because he shouts out Bombay quite a few times, and that's my favorite liquor bottle. So shout out to Wiz for that taste, man.
Yeah, and Rolling Papers has quite the vibe to it because I don't even know if it has like an album vibe. I feel as if it's more of like a playlist sort of setting where, there's just memorable like hit songs that are, carrying that whole track list. And what was cool about this is you think about Black and Yellow and On My Level, those were some of the biggest songs of 2011 and really shaped the way that Wiz Khalifa was going to go with the rest of his career because he had an incredible run even all the way up to 2017. So, and he's still making great projects and is still, consistent with his drops for his fans. So
do you feel like when his career ends that like he'll be mostly remembered, let's say, for the Fast and Furious tracks where we got like See You Again or Own It?
No, I don't think so.
But those are probably his most popular tracks.
Yes, there is his most popular tracks, but it's because of a reason. It's for a reason. It's because, those are like the pop singles that he has to put out. But if you talk to anyone who was bumping, Mac Miller at the time or, Wiz, it was just like...
That Pittsburgh scene was different.
It was, he carried a different weight. So no, I don't think he's only known for those Fast and Furious songs. I mean, just Kush and OJ alone like completely blows both of those songs songs out of the water for me.
Easily.
So let's move on to number 7. I hope you guys like that pick. But let's go on to the Sideline Story by J. Cole. And this had to be a standout because this is really when J. Cole popped off on the scene as far as like a mainstream level goes. Of course, we have his lead single, Workout, that did major numbers on this project. So talk to me about this, man, as a J. Cole fan. Like, do you think that this was the career-defining project for him that really allowed him to get into studio albums?
I mean, it's interesting because this was the lead for a long time, and he kind of put out Friday Night Lights to hold the fans over. And this was huge because at the time this album came out, he had the backing of Jay-Z. He was, signing that Rock Nation deal, and he actually gets into that, on the album, which is pretty cool. But to me, once again, really solid album, not a classic. Again, I think that Cole does have a few classics in his catalog. This one just isn't one of those for me, but it's still a great project. I love how motivational the essence of the album is. And I mean, even, those more pop and radio-friendly songs that Can't Get Enough featuring Trey Songz, like, I love that kind of, dance hall sample that he throws in there. There's just like some reggae in there. And a lot of enjoyable tracks, and I mean, he's talking about relatable topics, to be honest, like abortion, like going from that bench player to that start player in terms of the hip hop game, and it was really cool. And I think that a lot of people appreciated how honest and how relatable Cole was throughout the project.
Yeah, and it was great because J. Cole fans had this great introduction to a project where it wasn't necessarily, some of his strongest material, because we had seen, his strongest material on albums like For Your Eyes Only in 2014, Forest Hill Drives. And then, you get this because he's starting to pop off on the scene, and a lot of people are captivated by it because it didn't necessarily, I feel as if, hit as hard as like something like GKMC did, or like another album we're going to talk about on this list. But for J. Cole, it's so important because I feel as if it bridged that gap that he had collected, like all of these fans from his mixtape series, and then the Sideline Stories, what solidified all of it for them, and then going through the rest of his discography just took massive W's. And what I like about this is that it was completely different than what was coming out back then. Like, it had a different element to it. Like, it felt honest. It felt brutally honest. Like, it didn't feel as if J. Cole was holding back on his content matter and wasn't even, scared to show his softer side of things. And then there's also that duality on songs like Rise and Shine, where you're getting him going at a million miles an hour, and then he's just fucking ripping it. So there's great standouts on this track.
He also produced most of this on his own.
Because he's a fantastic producer. So this was also a chance where J. Cole was able to try out his production, was able to see how, he was going to be able to craft his projects for the future. So very important album that year. And where do you maybe rank it amongst his whole discography?
It's probably my least favorite Cole album, to be honest. But I mean, I'm not taking anything away from it. I think that I appreciate his cadences on this. They're very calm. They're very cool. And then you get songs like Breakdown, where he talks about seeing his father for the first time in a while. But my favorite moment on the project is probably going from interlude to Sideline Story, because you get that kind of that storytelling from him, where he talks about the day that he found out he got signed by Jay-Z, and how he got pulled over by the cops. I think it was for like unpaid parking tickets or something, and he spent the night in jail the same day that he found out he got signed. And then on Sideline Story, the beat kind of transitions right into it, and then he raps about really taking his career to the next level, and it's just positive vibes throughout. And I love the 90s jazz rap type of production he went with. Not only that, but a lot of even the pop and radio friendly songs that J. Cole has spoken poorly on, I kind of still get enjoyment out of. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Something like Workout is still always welcome.
That's fire.
Yeah, it's always welcome in my playlist or any party I'm at. But let's move on to number 6, guys. And this is the Carter 4. And I'm going back to a time where this album was so heavy in my rotation for a lot of good reasons. And it was because I feel as if, like, Lil Wayne was still in his prime with this album. I genuinely think that this was still a part of his iconic run, and a lot of people say that the dip off of quality from the Carter 3 to the Carter 4 was evident, but I don't think it was a question of dip off of quality. I think that Wayne was experimenting with different sounds, and he was going for maybe a different approach with this album. So if I have to ask you for a top 3 off this album right off the bat, what are you giving me?
Oh man, that's so tough. Give me Mega Man.
Mega Man at number 1?
Yeah, no, not a number 1.
What are you giving number 1?
I don't know. Anyways, I'm not gonna rank it, but Mega Man, She Will, and Maybe John.
Yeah, that's
John
your,
slaps. I don't know, man. What about you?
I would go number one, President Carter.
Oh, President Carter slaps.
I'd maybe go number one, President Carter. Carter, excuse me. Number two, 6'7" for sure has to be in there. And then at number three, it's between She Will and Mega Man. I don't know. I'm okay. I'll give it to Mega Man. Fuck it.
You know what's amazing, man, is that if you look at the Carter 3 and the Carter 4, you have two of Wayne's biggest bangers in a milli and 6 foot, 7 foot, both produced by Bangladesh, and they both have like the same formula. You know what I mean? You have these hard hitting drums, and you have this kind of vocal loop that plays for the duration of the song, and that's what makes just Wayne spaz off, and that's what I love the most about this album is Wayne's performance, because the wordplay is super clever and very simple too. The flows are really loose, and he just had a lot of fun with it. And I mean, if you look at, let's say, the wordplay on a song like Mega Man, I had a bar written down here.
Mega Man's crazy.
Yeah, we Jackson and then light up the L Samuel.
Yeah,
like just saying Samuel L. Jackson's name like that. I mean, that kind of creativity in the wordplay, I feel like we're lacking now, especially in today's era. And it's interesting because so many rappers nowadays are influenced by Wayne, and yet they can't spit the way that he did.
Well, this is another thing about it, is that you also had this romantic duality that Wayne was bringing to the track list. Like, talk about How to Love. Think about how many people were banging that. And
did you like his singing on that?
Honestly, I did. I think for the time I did, because think about the amount of airplay that song got and how many radio shows were spinning that record. Like, I could go back to when I was 11 years old, and I remember just being in the car with my parents and hearing How to Love on the radio, all the way from Canada. Like, that's fucking incredible, especially for an installment of the Carter series. Like, all the way back in 2011, like, hip hop wasn't as prominent in Canada as it is now, and just being able to break these huge barriers for this album was massive. And going back to what you were saying, this was, I feel as if Lil Wayne's just explosion of talent. Like, he did not hold back here, and he was just showcasing all of his skills. Like, you have like iconic lines from this album, like Real G's move in silence like lasagna. Like, there's some serious punchlines in here that I feel as if have inspired artists now, and that have been able to reap the benefit off the influence. So where do you rank this amongst the Carter series?
Oh man, it's definitely high up, but I think the Carter 2 is probably my favorite Carter.
It is my favorite Carter too. I don't know.
It's hard though, because
I just said that.
I probably have this at number 3. I have probably C2, then C3, and then C4. But it's crazy how the feature list for this was amazing. I feel like the features really stood out to me. I mean, think about the hook that Drake does on She Will. Fucking legendary, man. And I wanted a verse from him there, obviously, but then you get Drake's verse on It's Good with Jadakiss, and they're fucking spazzing out on that. Then you have Nas and Busta Rhymes on the outro.
Let's talk about Rick Ross on John. That is such a slept-on hook.
I know.
That's a slept-on hook, bro. I remember when we were in high school, we used to listen to that song and we used to trip the fuck out because it brought so much energy to a time where, like, Lil Wayne was carrying that lane. Like, you went through a Lil Wayne album, and the amount of energy and sort of iconic energy that you got out of this project was unprecedented. I feel as if no one was really making energetic albums like Wayne was, and it just proves to how dedicated he is to his craft, because there's not a single song on this album where Wayne is not rapping his ass off. Like, he is giving you just 16 after 16 of just pure ammo. Like, this guy's going at it and he does not stop.
And the content,
it's crazy.
Yeah, the content isn't always super focused, but you do get some introspective songs like Nightmares of the Bottom, where he talks about, like, what if I actually did fall from grace? Like, what would that be like? You know what I mean? So seeing him kind of, splash in those kind of themes too was really dope. And this album was a huge success, man. This album, first week, sold 964,000 copies, went 5 times platinum. And it's crazy because apparently he started recording this right after the Carter 3, realized, okay, this is not good enough. And then he had his prison stint. So right after he came out of jail, he recorded this album and restarted completely from what he had before and gave us a great body of work. So that's our number 6. But let's move on now to our number 5, which some people might surprise us for having it this high up, but to us, this is a classic album, right?
No, this is definitely a classic album. I don't know if it's because I was such a big Eminem fan at the time, and I still am a big Eminem fan. He's still, in my all-time great lists, and has really, introduced me to the genre. But Hell the Sequel by Mad Meets Evil is a fucking great project, and it's one of the most underrated projects I feel as if in the community, because no one talks about it. But I don't know if it's because it flew under the radar, or maybe the content's been outdated. But I'm able to put on this record, and it still has that same feeling as it did when I was 11 years old. So again, like, why do you think that this album has aged so well, and why do you think it's so underappreciated by hip hop fans?
I think the first thing that people have to understand is that there's history to the making of this album, because we got Royce and M's first collaboration on the song Bad Meets Evil from the Slim Shady LP, all the way back in '99, and on that song they said we'll see you again in hell for the sequel, and then they make their collab album like over fucking 10 years later, and it's called Hell the Sequel, and then the first song is called Welcome to Hell. But what I love about this album is the chemistry between Eminem and Royce da 5'9", just because there's certain, songs where they'll literally finish each other's sentences and give these quick fire verses back and forth, and the double time flows that they have. I mean, to me, between the two of them, no one outshines one another, and it's a fucking lyrical masterclass.
I find this project better than Recovery. I'm just gonna say that right here, right now. Like, I feel as if this would be a major standout in Eminem's discography, and
there's no misses.
If this was like an Eminem solo album, it would be up there in my top tier list, and it's because you just get like even top level like storytelling from them. Like, go back to the reunion.
Yes, sir.
Like the verses back and forth, like being in the same sort of universe, but then like they're both stuck in these predicaments with women, and then they finally end up meeting at the end of the song. Like, I just love that. Not only that, but the lead singles for this album were fucking massive. Think about, okay, this is crazy. I just thought about this. One of the first, I believe, singles like that I remember advertising on YouTube ads with Vevo. Is it pronounced Vevo or Vivo?
Vivo. I think.
With Vivo was fucking Fastlane. Like, that was one of the first trailers I remember ever being advertised on that platform, and it got me so hyped for the album, and I didn't even know what album I was listening to until I ended up going into it. Let's Go to Loud Noises, where you get just this lyrical onslaught by Eminem, opening up the song. It's absolutely dirty. So who do you think had the better performance out of Royce and Marshall?
Oh man, that's so tough. I mean,
Nick, what do you say? You're in the background. What do you say? Who had the better?
Oh man, I really don't know.
What
did Nick say? Eminem?
Yeah, no, Nick says he doesn't know, but it's just such a hard topic because they're both top tier lyricists, and they full put it on display over here.
Yeah, no, they definitely did, and I mean, even Slaughterhouse and Loud Noises, like you said, they all did their fucking thing, and very cinematic album. And I just feel like for all the Eminem fans who kind of didn't like the sober Eminem on Recovery, a year later you were gifted this, where it was kind of a return to that playful kind of shady era that we were so used to beforehand. So to me, this album's amazing, and like I said, lyrical masterclass from the two of them.
Absolutely. But guys, listen, now we're starting to crack into our deep section of the list, and speaking about sections, let's go to Section 80 by Kendrick Lamar. We have this at our number 4 position on our ranking, and man, it's crazy to think that he started his legendary run with this project here. And the thing is that people said like, okay, Overly Dedicated was, a good project, and, it had its songs, but this was really the project that really kicked off Kendrick's career and made people realize what type of MC he could really become, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, Section 80 is a classic album to me, just like Good Kid, Mad City is, just like To a Butterfly is, and just how Damn might end up aging as one as well. But speaking on Section 80, I mean, this is a concept album if you really think about it. And I love how, Section 80 does have a history to it, because it refers to the Section 8 housing projects from the 1980s, and how in 1982 Ronald Reagan had cut the funding for these housing projects by half. And it was crazy because one, kind of thing that has stayed on Reagan's legacy over the years is the fact that he was trying to, put that divide between the rich and the poor. And that's kind of, expressed by Kendrick in the album. So to see him take the history and flip it into his own views and his own ideologies is fucking brilliant. And not only that, but I mean, you start off this album with "Fuck Your Ethnicity," where Kendrick's saying like, you know, I'm gonna tell you my story, and I don't care what color you are, I don't care what background you are. If you can relate to it or at least try to understand my story, I'm welcoming you in as a listener. And that's great that, you know, he wants to have that universal message that speaks to everybody, especially even people who maybe can't necessarily exactly relate to it. He's trying to make you understand.
Well, not only that, but I feel as if this album has such complex, content matter, and yet he makes it seem so light and so accessible. So, example, on a song like "Hole Up," like that's a great track to the track list because
that's my least favorite song on the album.
No.
That's my least favorite. I love the whole project, but if I had to choose a least favorite, it's probably that one.
Oh, I don't know. I would probably say "No Makeup." I think that's probably my.
But I love the meaning behind that song.
No, I know it's great, but I don't know. I find that's like the one like song I always have a bit. I have a bit of trouble going through.
Okay, can I tell you why I love "No Makeup"?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so with "No Makeup," it's a song about Kendrick being with this girl who we end up learning is Keisha, which we'll get into Keisha's song later, but. He's telling her like, you don't got to cover yourself up with makeup, you're naturally beautiful. And that's kind of a double metaphor for people not having to cover up their personal issues by consuming alcohol or taking drugs. Not only that, but at the end of that song, Keisha says, well, the reason why I'm actually wearing makeup is because I have a black eye. And then Kendrick says, just wait till number 11. And track 11 is Keisha's song, and that's where we get kind of the background story, but about why, she has that black eye and why she's going through these rough experiences.
And then I guess we get even more context on "Sing About Me" on GKMC.
That
kind of ties it all together. Okay, I could see it. I feel as if aesthetically for the whole overall listen, like it's one that I sort of gravitate towards less. But
I feel you.
What's your favorite song on this? I'd probably have to say, I have a 3K listen. I have a 3-way tie. High Power, High Power, Poor Man's Dreams, and ADHD. Those are probably my that's like my 3-way tie for me.
ADHD is a classic just because, who didn't, play GTA 5 and fucking bump that song?
Not only that, but I feel as if it's also the first time we ever heard Kendrick in that GKMC light. Like, you could take ADHD and slot it in on GKMC and it would sound really fucking good.
Not only that, but it's also like a song similar to, let's say, Swimming Pools, because again, it's kind of packaged as this party song that's a banger, but there's that deeper meaning behind it of how substances could really fuck you up. So I love that aspect of it. But to me, it's the stories on like Keisha's song where he's kind of talking about the dangers of prostitution and leading you through and building up this story of a girl who, is kind of forced by her circumstances and her environment to lead this life of prostitution. And then, of course, it tragically ends with her being raped and killed. And Kendrick ended up saying how he made this song and played it for his sister when she was 11 years old to kind of show her what that kind of life can lead to. And that was just so fucking powerful to me, man.
It was super powerful. And you'll also find like spiritually conscious songs like High Power on here that opens your mind to a whole different ideology. And I had mentioned this, I believe, in an episode or a TikTok, that this was the song that convinced me on Kendrick Lamar. Like when I hear him just talk about, building his own pyramids and writing his own history and, being connected so deeply routed to himself that, no one could really break him, and that he's connected to this high power, and then that's how he moves.
What does high power mean to you?
I think it has a personal meaning to me because, it doesn't necessarily mean one thing. I feel as if it's everything. It's something that, you have to carry out within your life and that you could only really define until you get to the end of your journey. And what's crazy about it is that, high power sort of means to me like living on God's speed, like being on a different level and kind of understanding that there's all these moving parts that go into every decision you make, like the butterfly effect or, certain, instances of philosophy within it. Like there's just too much to go into.
I feel like it's about like, let's say maybe like the richness of your mind or the richness of your soul and the knowledge that you gain, and how if you're rich in that, you don't need to be wealthy in any other type of way. You don't need the cash if you have that.
Because the thing is that like, of course, like that's the meaning of the song, but the whole thing, I feel as if the whole meaning of high power is to allow you to connect to high power and to connect to your own higher self and your own higher entity. Like and these are, high power is not only a Kendrick term, it's been used in all of TDE's camp and Black Hippies camp. Like this is something that they live by, and a philosophy that, you kind of have to learn for yourself. But At the end of the day,
Yeah,
Section
man,
80 is such
it's
a
great, and I mean, to me,
fuck, man.
you were saying how high power sold you. To me, Ronald Reagan era sold me just because
Another slapper.
that song showed me that he was a phenomenal lyricist. I mean, from his vicious delivery to the internal rhyming and the way that he's able to paint this picture of kind of the aftermath of the crack epidemic in the 80s, and how the circumstances of people who were born in the 80s in these urban environments were not great, and he had to deal with that, and kind of paints a picture of a war zone, in Compton. It's really mind-blowing. And even the production on this, I love the jazz rap influence. I love the trumpets, the horns, and Ab-Soul kind of being the second narrator to this was
Yeah.
also really dope.
It was a great put together album, and a lot of people consider it a mixtape, but it is officially considered an album.
This is a
and-
classic, man. I'll argue anybody.
Oh, absolutely. If anyone says otherwise, I'll take your phone call. Trust me. You guys could DM me on Instagram. I'll take it. But let's go on to our top 3 now, and this is interesting, guys. I have to say, because these next 3 projects could all be slotted at number 1, number 2, or number 3. But
For me, the number one's a lock. though.
the number 1's a lock. But number 2 and number 3 are very interchangeable. But number 3 has to be Take Care by Drake. And what this did for the industry was monumental, because it was such a rare instance where we saw R&B and soul hip hop come together and mesh so well within one track list. And this is a direct influence from Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreak. And, this was crazy because it also had such a consistent track list. And it was kind of Drizzy coming out and really showing his full flair as an artist, not only a rapper. And the criticisms with this project are, I guess...
Are there criticisms?
The only criticism that there was, and it was mentioned by 40 on Tuscan Leather, because they had explained why they had Tuscan Leather as the Nothing Was the Same intro track. It was because Drizzy was considered a rapper and came in as an MC, and then started to realize that, hey, I can maybe go in really deep with this R&B sound, and had that duality to me. And critics used to critic that, like, you're putting out a rap album, but there are songs like Take Care on here, or Marvin's Room, like, where's the place for it? So that's what had led to a more focused album and hip-hop album with Nothing Was the Same. But going back to Take Care, why do you think this works for Drake, and why do you think it has such a monumental place within his discography? Because ask any Drizzy fan, this is probably one of the first albums that they ever been put onto. So explain me your take.
Yeah,
with it.
man. This album just, it captures a fucking mood for me. You know what I mean? And it's a big part of that is, like you said, fusing that R&B and soul into hip hop. And not only that, but I mean, the way that, Drake uses his auto crooning, the way that he uses his singing here and has that duality of the rapper and singer, and is able to be super vulnerable while also being able to talk shit on songs like Lord Knows, that was like, wow, like, this is fucking new. Like, he's not afraid to get into his feelings, but he's also, comfortable with taking us through that journey of his relationships and his fame. And I mean, take a song like The Ride, man. That's to me one of Drake's best ever songs. He gives you 3 different perspectives. One about how he gets fake love from people, another one about a relationship gone wrong, and then just him kind of, reflecting on that fame. And you get a Weekend hook that's fucking legendary on this song, and it sounds like a soul sample loop, and it's genius from start to finish. And I mean, even production-wise, it's so moody and just a fucking great album from start to finish.
Yeah,
me.
but Boy Wonder, Noah Shapib, even like Just Blaze, T Minus, like there's way too many good producers that have touched this project. And if you even want to talk about the underrated tracks on here before I even get into the smash singles, which are going to completely blow your mind, Underground Kings, Will Be Fine. Like, these are tracks that, add to the overall, vibe of the playlist, because you're getting more introspection by Drizzy. Like, he's talking to you about his day by day, and he's talking to you about what it means to be on top and the mindset that you need to be there. And then once you get Headlines and once you get, the motto, those were being played everywhere. Those were probably 2 of the biggest songs of 2011, and I feel as if the whole world was sold on Drizzy at that point, because not only that, but you have 2 mega rap hits, and then you release an R&B hit like Marvin's Room and something like Take Care with Rihanna. Like, there was just that duality that Drizzy was playing with, and made it sound so clean and coherent in the same track list. And I guess the another gripe you could have with it is that as an album as a whole, it doesn't necessarily follow any thematic basis or isn't as concentrated as something like Nothing Was the Same. But when it comes to iconic Drizzy tracks, there's no shortness here.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing's lacking on this, and was one of the first times he really showed that duality in full effect. So, do you think that this album is one of the most important to Drizzy's career because of the way that he was able to exploit not one lane now in hip hop and frat rap, but another lane in R&B and soul?
Of course
where
he was.
It was so much richness in
And
production.
I mean, he was, in part inspired by The Weeknd, but I think people kind of put too much light on that and don't credit Drake as much. I mean, The Weeknd did have, credits in terms of writing and, just overall, music. I would say, whatever. He handled musically certain things on, I think, 4 or 5 tracks that were supposed to be on House of Balloons. And I would say that he did help him, he did help him put together that kind of, I would say, foggy R&B feel that you have to certain tracks. But overall, I mean, what Drake does is he shows his versatility like no one ever has before, and that influenced an entire generation of rappers to do so and make it kind of acceptable in hip hop, and that was amazing. And I mean, he's grateful for it all in the end. If you look at a song like "Look at What You've Done," he's kind of thanking his mother, and he has that voicemail from his grandmother Evelyn at the end where she thanks him for having her stay at this nice residency. And I just love when Drake, takes us back to those stories of when he was in his mom's basement and just starting up. And you just get so much, you learn so much about Drake on this album.
And you could learn so much about yourself as well because, there's parallels in his love stories on this track that you could use for your own relationships in your life. And, you take songs like, let's say, Hell Yeah Fucking Right. Don't tell me that doesn't get you pumped at a party and it's not one of Lil Wayne and Drake's, best collaborations. And I love that fucking video. That is one of my favorite Drizzy music videos. And especially when he's at the big, whatever. We'll talk about that shit another day. But let's move on to number 2 because this is where we had a bit of trouble. Like, do we put Take Care at number 2 or do we put it at number 3? We ended up putting Take Care at number 3, but these are interchangeable. And I think it's because the first album me and you ever want to go get together at HMV was Watch the Throne, and we ended up playing that in my mom's minivan after.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a lock from there. I mean,
That was opening day, man.
Yeah, how sick was that fucking album? And
That was insane, man. I mean, we were 11 years old. And
grade 6, dude.
I know. No, I think it was grade 5.
Grade
man.
5 or grade 6?
I think it was grade 5.
No, it was our last year of elementary school.
I don't
for
think
sure.
so, man. I remember that day, man. I remember that day. We were super fucking hyped, and we picked up the album and fell in love from the start. And how can you not? I mean, this was a collab album that needed to happen if you really think about it, just because of the history of Kanye and Jay-Z. I mean, look at how Kanye started producing for him all the way back to the Dynasty, how he contributed heavily to the Blueprint, bringing in that soul energy into Jay-Z tracks. I mean, he totally, took the quality of Jay-Z's production to another level. And I mean, to me, yes, we got, a lot of features back and forth on albums from them beforehand, but we really saw them come together as a duo on this album. And what's amazing to me is that Kanye West admitted at the 2013 OVO Fest that if it wasn't for Drake putting pressure on them, they would have never released this fucking album.
Yeah, it's crazy because the consistency in this album is just it's too crazy, like going from start to finish. Like if you're going through the deluxe version of Watch the Throne, there's 16 tracks as a whole, and I could go through this whole track list. In my opinion, like I have a very hard time skipping any of these tracks. Like the only one that people say is a bit iffy is Lift Off with Beyonce.
I love that song.
But I love that song. And then, obviously you have the big 3 with, In Paris and No Church in the Wild and then Otis. And then you start going on to maybe having some of the best material on the album with New Day, where, they're talking about their future children and they're talking about how they want to introduce these children to the world and type of education they want to give them with certain perspectives of being a mogul. So there's just so much knowledge to be grabbed out of here. Then I want to just talk about Primetime. Like I feel as if that is, one of the best collaborations I've heard from them, and one of my favorites for a reason, because the type of confidence you're getting out of this track from both of them, it's just like, fuck you guys. Like no one's touching us. We're in prime time right now. Like we're putting out this album and the whole industry is going to stop and listen. And that's what I think, that's what I love about it is just, you're getting them at their best. Like no one outshined each other. Like Kanye's production and rapping mixed with, Jay-Z's mogul talk and the way that he's able to paint these vivid pictures just created this beautiful lush scenery of luxury and mogul talk. So what's the one thing you get out of this track list that really stuck with you over the past 10 years?
It's definitely just the braggadocious, energy from the two of them, and seeing them connect over this production that has these progressive rock influences, that has these phenomenal sample chop ups. It's masterful. And you mentioned New Day, and that's probably my favorite ever collab between Kanye and Jay-Z. It's because you have these striking piano keys, because you have that Nina Simone sample of the song Feeling Good. And then the way that, like, to me, this song was the most grounded and the realest that they were with us, the audience, on the entire album, because, like, it gave me an understanding of, like, okay, so when you're at this level, like, this is the shit that you think about on a regular day, is like,
yeah,
my kids aren't even fucking born yet. And it's like that bar that Jay-Z has, like, sorry, Junior, I already ruined you, because you ain't even alive and paparazzi pursuing you. Like, that put me, like, that shook me, because I'm like, wow, these are the problems that they have, is like, it's a generational passing of the fame of them being cultural icons and having to deal with the fact that they can't go out in public and necessarily live those normal lives. And like you said, man, them wanting to have, wanting to educate their children the right way, and just, put on for them and give them that generational wealth. It's fucking amazing. And again, another sample, Try a Little Tenderness by Otis Redding on the song Otis. Fucking Kanye did that in 15 minutes, man. And again, the wordplay by Kanye on that, man, I'll take you back to it. I get a custom, you a customer. You ain't accustomed to going through customs. You ain't been nowhere. Like the alliteration there, using the custom and playing around with it. It's some of Kanye's most flair-filled rapping. And like you said, no one outshines each other. Production's phenomenal. And even a song like Murder to Excellence, think about the themes they're bringing into it with that.
Like the political stances and like talking about gang violence and advocating for that on such a braggadocious album, like saving a track just for that sort of content matter was beautiful. And obviously it has more of like a rock and roll sort of influence to it. And it sounds beautiful, because at the end of the day, you love getting this sort of introspection from Kanye and Jay-Z, where they're giving you their ideas and their sort of thoughts on, public matters that, need to be addressed. And especially at a time where like Kanye and Jay-Z were so up and they didn't have to include a song like that on their track list. They did, and they did it phenomenally. And I also want to talk about No Church in the Wild, because this is probably what kind of kickstarted the mainstream fame of Frank Ocean too. Like, that is easily one of the most iconic, I would say, verses on this album. It's
chorus is more.
Well, like, yeah, yes, my bad. So, do you think that without Frank Ocean on this song, that it would have maybe been a dead track? Or who else would you want to see on No Church in the Wild?
Nobody. I wouldn't want to see anybody else, man.
Out.
I mean, Frank Ocean's chorus was fucking perfect for that. I mean, him kind of, questioning the idea of a higher power, questioning, what's a king to a god, what's a god to a non-believer, like, really deep shit. And his singing on it is always in the perfect pitch for him. And I mean, just some of the best verses on the entire project. And it's fucking masterful from start to finish. And I mean, to me, there's so much to grab onto in terms of content matter, in terms of even party bangers on this album. But something that I never asked you, which I do want to ask you, is did you ever hear the song Living So Italian, which was supposed to make the track list, but for whatever reason never made it?
No, I have never.
Man, that song samples Con te partirò by Andrea Bocelli. It's fucking crazy, man. I heard the leak a long time ago. I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but that song was fucking special.
Wow, I have to go through some Andrea Bocelli right after this. But yeah, it's always a mood when going through Watch the Throne, because you feel the luxury, you feel the motivation, and you also feel the braggadocious, sort of aura from both Kanye and Jay-Z. But let's move on to our number one pick, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a fucking classic. This is easily one of the best concept albums that I've heard from the 2010 decade. And whenever the Roots decide to get locked into a concept and decide to execute on that concept, I feel as if there's no one that really executes it like they do, especially with the way that Questlove's production, plays into Undone, and then the way that even Black Thought, really develops this crazy character and, goes with it from start to finish. So off your first listen of Undone, because you listened to this way before I did, and you actually put me onto this project as a hip hop listener. Where do you feel as if you went right with the project, and what did you later discover after your second, third, fourth, and fifth listen?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, there's going to be spoilers for this, guy. So if you have not yet listened to Undone, please do so. But we are going to be talking about kind of the narrative, because the album revolves around the story of a man's life. And what's crazy is that when you go into this project, after the first listen, you're kind of taken aback, because it starts off with an instrumental track, then you get songs, and then when you get to the end, you have 4 instrumental tracks. And you realize after that listen, or maybe after the second listen of start to bottom, that the album was actually told in reverse chronological order, and that it's actually meant to be listened to from bottom to top.
Yeah.
And what I love about this album is that it's about a man living in poverty, and the way that he felt trapped, and that for the only way for him to make money was to become a drug dealer, and to commit murder and to get wrapped up into this crazy lifestyle. But what I love is that this album, Questlove has said this, that they were trying to go against the rap genre conventions of glamorizing that drug and street life. Like, they didn't want to give another Don Corleone type of lifestyle, showcased. They wanted to actually show this man struggling with his decisions. And that's what's amazing, is that he's having this existential crisis about his life and his actions, and ultimately it leads to his suicide.
And the crazy part about this project is I was left with one sort of like idea, and came down to one thing. It's like, did Redford choose that path, or was it already made for him at the beginning of the thing? Because you could kind of see how the instrumentals at the beginning of the track list sort of play on like the whole thing of being born, and then sort of transition.
The first one is him dying though, and then the last 4 are him being born.
Okay, but that's what I'm talking about, like in the chronological order that you're supposed to go into. And then once you get into once you get into Tip the Scale, it's like, it's just verses about, the first verse is really about Redford being in like this mode of him being like, okay, you know what, life shit, but I'm still going at it. And you have this like glimpse of hope from him. And then in the second one, it's kind of like him being like, yeah, but at the end of the day, no one will remember me. So what's kind of the point to all this? And then you see, as the track list progresses, even the features start playing into that Redford character, because they're giving you different mindsets. And then obviously once you get through it to the end of the track list, Redford unfortunately commits suicide. And then it ties into this whole thing of like, did he really choose that path, or the natural nuances of life choose that path for him? So what do you think it is?
Crazy. That's what's relatable about it, is that it's like, we've seen this in hip hop history all throughout, where, artists talk about how, certain circumstances in your environment don't have to lock you into life choices, but you can't deny that they'll influence those life choices and put you on certain paths. I mean, if we were, living in, very, let's say, impoverished upbringings, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. Like, our trajectories would have taken different courses. And that's what he's saying here, is that, he, through his poverty, he felt trapped, and he felt like he needed a way out. And to him, getting into that kind of lifestyle was his way out. And then you get his regret. But even production-wise, I mean, you get a string quartet here. You get live instrumentals, violins, cellos. I mean, Questlove and the whole team behind it pulled out all the stops. And musically, there's no fucking album that sounds like this anymore.
No,
the live
there's
instrumentals,
not.
the fact that they're a band playing these instruments live is amazing. The fact that it's told in reverse order. I mean, who knows if that maybe inspired Damn by Kendrick Lamar.
And that's what I was thinking. Because
I don't know if there's albums before this that have done that, but I can't think off the top of my head of any that have.
Tell us in the comment section if some other albums before this that are in like that unchronological order, because as you were saying, that the production was so well done, and especially when I had gotten towards the end of the track list, or maybe the start of the track list with in that chronological order that you're supposed to listen to it for the thematic basis, the sequencing on those beats are fucking incredible. And it's crazy because you also get these time changes where you feel as if like you're being uplifted, and you almost feel scared by these crazy piano riffs, and then you hear like these smooth violins going on where it's kind of taking you into I would say a psychedelic trance, and then boom, track list starts, and then you're on this fucking journey. And not only that, but this album is only 39 minutes. Okay, that's incredible because
That's great for replay value.
and not only that, but how do you fit such a complex theme and execute it so well in only 39 minutes?
Yeah, man.
And that's what I had noticed on the first listen was just, wow. Like, I felt as like, I haven't been wowed by projects that much lately, but when you told me to go through this, because it's been such a long time since I visited this or I've even gone through a couple of tracks, I was absolutely blown away from this.
The production is super crisp. I mean, even take a song like "Make My," which is kind of the climax where Black Thought's kind of Redford Stevens, the name of the character, is kind of taking his last words and kind of penning that suicide letter. You kind of get these keyboard notes that are super clean. You get these subtle violins, and then you have Big Crit who's talking through the character of Redford, and he's saying how he sold money, he sold drugs to not get into the cycle of poverty, and also how he never felt fulfilled by his riches and by his money because he acquired it in an immoral way. And just having that really humane kind of personality to someone who's in that street life's amazing. My favorite song, though, is probably Cool On, where you have this amazing sample and you have Redford who's embracing his life as a killer, saying like, I'm booted up, I'm strapped, I'm calm and cool. Like, he's collected going into whatever situation he has to go into. And that poise just felt super authentic and realistic. And I mean, what a fucking character piece, man. To me, this is one of the best concept albums that I've ever heard. And like you said, the fact that they were able to pack in so much in a 38 minute listen, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and even go to a song like Lighthouse. That was a standout for me too, because it was visiting upon the topic of, someone feeling so lonely that like you just feel like the lighthouse is just missing you every single time because your face is in the water and you're just laying low and you feel as if you're drowning. Like, that's crazy, because not only that, but Dice Raw delivers it in such a beautiful way, and he actually has the chorus on this, and it sounds great. Like,
Beautiful.
I love the way he delivered it, and even the features on this project add so much, because if you didn't have the features, you wouldn't have those extra introspections. Because imagine you would have Black Thought doing this whole album. Maybe it would have gotten a bit stagnant. Maybe you wouldn't have seen diversity in the writing, and it would have not added to the overall flow of the album. But Big Crit, Dice Raw, Greg Porn, like, these guys had added that extra value to this track list that allowed me to further understand, the underlying messages. And what's crazy is that I still don't understand anything about this album, and I'm going to have to go back to Genius because there's just way too many things.
The vocabulary is intricate.
It's so
so many
intricate.
metaphors, man. And for that reason, it's sonically a masterpiece. It's lyrically a masterpiece. Thematically, there's no notes that didn't hit for us on this project, and that's why it's our #1 classic album of 2011. And it's crazy because I think that let's go through the actual list again and go through which ones we think are classics. So, Rolling Papers, not a classic for me. What about you?
Classic if you're a Wiz Khalifa fan and if you're a part
But
of that.
overall, no?
Maybe not in my books.
Watch the Throne, classic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hell, the sequel, classic.
Yeah, to me.
Section 80, classic.
To me.
Carter 4,
Yes.
maybe,
Yes.
yeah,
There's too
maybe.
much good Wayne material on there to say it's not a classic.
Cold World, The Sideline Story.
No, I don't
No,
think it's a
not for me
classic.
either. Take Care by Drake.
Yes, absolutely.
And Undone by the Roots, of course, man. Our
Absolutely.
#1 pick.
And it's crazy because that's probably one of the best, experimental hip hop albums that I have ever listened to. And I will continue to listen to that album forever because it's just art. And
It is.
Any of these albums can make your rotation in 2021. And I think that's what's the most important part about this video, guys, is like, go back to this music, revisit it, indulge, like, understand what, the laying grounds for a lot of these mega artists, and understand what they started with. So guys, thank you so much for watching all of this video. We're always trying to introduce these cool concepts, and as Lou said at the beginning of this episode, if you want to become a Patreon member and have a say on our YouTube videos, hit the link in the description, because all of our Patreon members are there, and we're doing this sort of content on the weekly, guys. So thank you again for sticking through, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for watching the video. It's always a pleasure doing content for you guys. Listen, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because we're doing album reviews, and we actually have our series called Everything We Know, where we take you guys through the whole album rollout of the hottest releases of the year. Not only that, guys, but our Patreon plan is now live. You guys can access that in the bio. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.